It's time to call the meeting to order, and it is 1:30 at this point to call the Planning Commission to order. Can I have everyone in the audience and my fellow commissioners silence their phone? And can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Present.
Commissioner Garner?
Present.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Present.
Commissioner Hudson?
Present.
Commissioner Song?
Present.
Vice Chair Maruzzi?
Here.
And Chair Woods?
Here.
7 members present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we have a staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Mr. Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, February 21st. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Thank you. Unless there's any revisions to the agenda, I'd like to move the agenda. Can I have a second? All in favor, please vote.
We don't need a formal vote on the machine. All those in favor?
Just all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. All right, we'll move on with the agenda and the first item of business. Oh, first of all, is there anyone in the audience that has anything to say on any item that is on the agenda or of general interest to the Planning Commission they would like to speak on? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The first item is the approval of the minutes of January 9th, 2019.
Move approval.
Is there a second? Okay. Is there any discussion on the agenda, on the minutes, excuse me? Commissioner Song?
Approving the meeting notes.
Okay, abstention noticed. Is there any more comments from? Okay, call for the vote. Commissioner Song, can you vote? Oh, you're abstaining. Can you just hit abstain? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the minutes are approved. We're going to move on to public hearing items. The first one is the Sons of Italy on behalf of Dolly Sinatra Lodge, number 2400, to reestablish a conditional use permit to operate a meeting hall within the existing building located at 1700 North Sierra Road, Zone P, Section 1. Can we have a staff report, please?
Chair Woods, Vice Chair Maruzzi, and Planning Commissioners, the request before you is to reestablish the permit that was previously granted to the Sons of Italy at 1700 North Sahara Road. The business is a philanthropic charitable organization, and the city permits these organizations anywhere in the city with the approval of a conditional use permit granted by the Planning Commission, actually, and ultimately the City Council. So what you have before you today is a recommendation for approval for the CUP to the City Council. In the section 9402 of the zoning code is where conditional use permits may be located in lists permitted uses that may be located anywhere in the city if approved by the City Council. So that is what you have before you. The business does operate on a weekly basis on Wednesday evenings during the months of October through May. On average, there are 70 attendees to the weekly meetings. So as I said, this is to reestablish the permit that was previously granted. The CUP was approved back in January of '96 by the City Council after receiving a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The CUP was limited to a 15-year term, and that term started in July of '97 when the certificate of occupancy was issued for the business, and the CUP expired in July of 2012. So the business has been operating without a permit, but staff was not aware of this issue until more recent years when the applicant came in to construct the parking lot. So what you have on the screen here is the existing floor plan, which just shows the meeting space, some outdoor dining space where they have their meetings, the kitchen space, kind of the entry areas. And then this is the plan that was presented for the outdoor park or the adjacent parking lot next to the building to the east of the building. So staff has reviewed the findings required for a conditional use permit and proposed findings in support of the project. Staff has also provided conditions of approval as an attachment to your report. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is here, and this is a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Excuse me. Could you go back to the slide that shows previous actions? Thanks. How much does it cost to apply for a CUP?
It's increased over the years. So back in '95, I'm sure it was a lot less, but currently it's about $6,000.
So the applicant would have had to pay that fee to come before us today?
Yes.
And if I'm reading this correctly, 15-year term. So in '96, they were granted a 15-year CUP, is that correct?
Yes.
And today your recommendation is to give them a 2-year CUP?
No, the recommendation is for an indefinite period.
I thought I read 2 years in your staff report.
So the conditions of approval state that they have 2 years to exercise the CUP. However, in this case, because they're currently operating, that really wouldn't apply. It would already be exercised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread that. Okay. So what you're recommending is one that just extends
Indefinite.
indefinitely. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Donovan.
Yes, regarding parking, is the new lot that's being built under construction now?
No.
It will have to be finished before the CUP can be activated, is that correct? So it meets the parking requirement?
There's not a time frame specified in the conditions. The previous CUP had 5 years, and they've, over the years, haven't had the funds to construct it or complete it. So really, it's ultimately as the organization gets the funds to construct it. So staff has not specified a specific time frame.
But if we approve it, it will not be, in your estimation, fully parked until the new lot is finished.
Correct.
And yet you're still recommending approval without being fully parked.
Right. So the business has operated for over 20 years now without the parking lot. And it doesn't seem that we've been getting any complaints from the adjacent properties. It seems that the on-street parking areas are adequate, at least in terms of their current operations. So staff has not specified that it has to be done within 90 days or a year or anything like that.
No complaint from the neighbors in the surrounding streets because Vista Chino itself is non-parkable,
Right.
basically. So it'd have to go into the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's some, as you see in the aerial, there's some vacant lots around the property. So on page 2 of your report, there really isn't a whole lot until you get further north of the site. The business, or I should say the organization, does own the property to the north, the vacant lot, and they own the property to the east where the parking lot is proposed. So, and maybe the applicant can speak to how much parking is used on the street, or if they have groups that come in one car. Maybe they can give us some additional information on that. But it doesn't seem that the neighbors have been complaining about the current operation.
And you do feel that the proposed parking, when finished, will accommodate up to 117 seats? Is it configured that way? Is it an auditorium style inside, like seats laid out in that way, or just casually?
It's informal seating. So my understanding is it's tables and chairs that are set up.
I see. Tables and chairs. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to the applicant about it as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Song.
Hi, David. I think it's more of a teaching moment for me. In the category for building department conditions for the conditions of approval, it seems to me that this is more of a engineering site grading, and this could go to Rick as well. Is the category of building department condition for construction permits, does that include the grading permit or any stormwater requirements that would trigger because of the improvements here on the site?
As a part of the building permit or potentially a grading permit, that would be reviewed by our engineering office, yes.
Right, but by having it in the category of building department, Public Works is also included.
Yes,
Okay.
because they're considered, grading plan is considered a permit that's issued by the city.
Okay, and therefore, from this process, the applicant will, if it goes favorably, now the applicant will submit it to Public Works in order to get the site proposed work reviewed and plan checked.
Yes. If they're moving more than 50 cubic yards of dirt, they would,
Right.
yes. Otherwise, it's a staff approval.
Correct, okay,
Well, a planning department approval through the, this permit.
okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any more questions of staff? Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing. I see the applicant is present. You'll have 10 minutes to come up and talk about your project, and then 2 minutes for rebuttal afterwards. If you'd state your name and your city of residence for the record, please. Hold on. Let me turn that on. Give me 1 second. Is it on? There it goes.
Hello? There you go, red light.
Thank you.
My name is Joseph Laporta. I'm president of the Dolly Sinatra Lodge, Sons of Italy. We're the only ones who use the Sinatra name, so it's a plus for the city of Palm Springs. We've been there for, like you say, 20 years. Our organization, the Sons of Italy, is founded in 1906. It's the oldest ethnic organization in the United States. They're in 30 different states. There's probably around 350,000 members, including Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and some other people that you probably heard of. We've been here, and we're a nonprofit organization, 501c3. At Christmas time, we do a drive for Barbara Sinatra's Children's Foundation. In the summertime, we have a convention up near San Francisco up there. That's where the Grand Lodge is for California. We give money to the Cancer Foundation and Alzheimer's and this and that. So nobody gets paid, not me, doing it out of the goodness heart to keep our culture going. It's a strong culture and a good culture, okay? So we're just looking, and the only bad thing is we're on a decline. It's like all social clubs, the VFWs, the Mooses, the Rotaries. The younger generation is harder and harder and harder to get them in and stuff like that. So we got to keep pounding, stretching our culture to get them in. And you don't have to be Italian to join. You just got to like Italian food. So that's where we're at. 501c3, we're a charitable organization. And like I said, since 1906, the Sons of Italy's been around.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
No.
Okay. Hearing nothing else to add, there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no one from the audience, I'll conclude. Oh, go ahead. Are you with?
My name is Doug Jones. I live at 899 Tamarisk Road in Palm Springs. And I have a parcel maybe 170 feet from the Sons of Italy's meeting hall. And I have never encountered a problem. And I have never heard of anybody else in the neighborhood complaining about the parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Since there's no one in the audience speaking either for or against the project, did you want to add anything else? You have 2 minutes if you'd like to do that.
No, just that we'd appreciate getting to CUP. We've been there forever, and we're, like I say, we're a 501c3. The more money we make, the more the charities get.
Great. If you'd stay there for just a minute, because there may be questions from the commissioners, I'm going to close public comments, and I'll open it up to questions from the commissioner. Commissioner Donenfeld.
I just wanted to get back to my parking issue. It sounds like I appreciate your problem with respect to a declining membership with this kind of organization. I know it's not just you, but it's throughout the country. Younger people just don't have these kinds of commitments. So it sounds to me as though that the number of people that you typically are going to have at the hall will be fully covered by parking either on your existing on-site property or in what is not really a neighborhood. It looks like there's a lot of vacant parcels, and your neighbor tells me he's had no problem. So do you envision when you are very, very busy, do you go to the vacant lots on your east and north side and park there?
No. We had a car that tried it one time and it sunk in the sand. So actually the tow truck couldn't pull it out. We needed a tow truck to pull the tow truck out. No, we don't ever go on there. I boarded it off so we can't drive onto it. So it's just vacant property.
But you found that you've had enough parking for your events?
We have 32 parking spots there, and it was all refurbished and everything a couple years
And
ago.
I take it if you had an event with 40 people, you'd be happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Are there, Commissioner Song?
When you submitted the plot plan as part of this application, the current parking layout with parking spaces 4 to 16, they encroach over the property line. Is that an agreement that you already had with the adjacent owner that you could park on their site?
It's been such a long time, we've been in business 17 years. Every 2 years, we change over our presidency thing, so I'm not exactly sure of the encroachment. But we own the property, so if it went over 2 or 3 feet or whatever like that, it's our property. And it's not, there's like just a sidewalk over there or something like that.
Okay, so you own the property to the north as well?
Yes, we own both properties. And the reason why the parking lot was going on the Vistacino side, the east side, would be because the properties one tied into one, and the other one was secondary, the other property. So we own that whole corner.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question of staff at this point. This is just a clarification question. I know the answer, but nonetheless, to put it in the public record, the CUP runs with the land. So no matter who owns this property, we're looking at this as a CUP that runs with the land. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Just make everyone aware of that. That's on the commission. Any more questions of the applicant? Commissioner Donenfeld?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming up.
Thank you.
Before you make your motion, go ahead and make your motion.
I move to approve the staff report on this matter.
Is there a second? Can I make an amendment to that motion?
Sure.
So I'm having finding number C talks about the landscaping, and I can't say with complete assurance that the landscaping meets the guidelines from the city at this point. So what I'd like to do is just add a condition of approval that says that the staff will review the landscape plans for the particular project.
I have no problem with that at all.
In the second, is that okay? Great. Okay, we have a first and a second, no more discussion. Can we call for the vote, please? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you and good luck in generating younger constituents to your organization.
Yeah, thank you, and everybody appreciate the charitable organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to public hearing number 2B, which is by Michael Hoffman, who is the owner of the Shell service station, requesting approval of a signed variance for the illumination of a red band on all sides of an existing fuel island canopy exceeding the allowable sign area for an automobile service station located at 4875 East Ramon Road. It's in Zone M1. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to do is direct you to the slide that's before you currently. This is an aerial photograph showing the Shell service station at the corner of East Ramon Road and South Gene Autry Trail. As you can see, there is the site is fully developed with the airport that is to the north, and then the Spring Shopping Center, which is diagonal, and then the Gene Autry Plaza, which is to the east or to the right of the slide, and then a vacant lot to the south. So the applicant had come into the city planning office to apply for a new sign program for the service station, which included a reface of a monument sign, which added pricing, which is a permitted and required by the state of California to include pricing, and it would be a digital sign. And then change out some various signage on the building that says car wash, that directs people through the site, and some signage on the fuel pumps. And one of the application requests was to add a red band around the canopy that is existing. The total square footage of all sides of the canopy is 207 square feet. So if you look at this photograph that is before you, there currently is a illuminated band that is around the shell the canopy with a yellow upper portion, and then you'll see the word shell. So they're proposing to change out the banding system to turn the canopy, the top portion of the canopy white with a yellow metal fascia with a red illuminated LED band around the canopy, and also to change out the Shell sign to focus on their new corporate logos, which is the Shell symbol, and I'll get to that in a minute. So when the application first came in, the planning office wanted direction from the Architectural Advisory Committee to determine if the red banding would be considered a sign. The zoning code is specific on what types of signs gasoline stations can have, and if this was considered as a sign, the zoning code would not allow it. So the AAC reviewed this and determined that at their September 4th, 2018 meeting that the band indeed should be considered a sign because it draws attention to the gas station itself. And that is the definition and the purpose of a sign. So in looking at this slide, this shows the current red band that is there now, and the canopy itself is large. The sign code only allows a maximum signage of 50 square feet, and we've determined that the band is a sign. So the only remedy to require or request the sign ban is to ask for a sign variance, which is approved by the Planning Commission. There are findings that are in the staff report, and an argument that is, or a justification that is made by the applicant, and I'll go over a few of the reasons why they're justifying and why staff is agreeing with the applicant's justification. So if we go back to this slide, the building was first built in 1993, and the main building, which is a car wash and a convenience store, is located at the corner. So it anchors the corner with the fuel islands placed at the rear of the site. This is a little unusual. You'll notice that most service stations in the city, that's reversed, where the building is to the back and the fuel islands are to the front, which provides the most visibility so people can see the gases present. Several years ago, there was a building that was constructed to the west, which is the America's Tire building. So for many years, the lot was vacant. One justification was that this building now blocks the view as you come down East Ramon Road, which this is a slide showing when you are approaching Gene Autry Trail. The America's Tire building is now blocking the canopy. Another justification was that the road, when it was built in 1993, was not as wide as it is now. So over the years, this intersection has been widened out to, I think it's 9 lanes across South Palm Canyon with a double turn onto Ramon. That was another justification for the sign variance. So in your packet, there is the request to add the sign band around the canopy. So in this slide, you'll see that it's red at the bottom with a yellow band, metal flashing, and then the Shell logo. Before you today was an exhibit that was handed out, which shows a detail of the red bar that will be placed around the canopy. It shows the yellow metal banding and then the red LED light that will encircle the canopy. This slide shows what it looks like currently at night and then what it will look like. So currently the light splashes the canopy which illuminates the red and the yellow. In the proposal, it will just be the red that will be illuminated. And as I said, this is another sign that's been approved by the planning office to change out the monument sign. And I just wanted to give you an idea of what other signage is requested. So before you today is a request that would be a sign variance request by the Planning Commission to determine that to allow this red banding to be approved. And once again, this is only for this site. It would not be permitted in other locations around the city. If any other canopy would come in, they would need to come back and ask for approval from the Planning Commission. So in your staff report, there were findings that need to be made to approve a sign variance. The hearing was noticed to the public with property owners within 500 feet. The staff has received no correspondence for or against. The applicant is here today, both the property owner and a representative from the sign company. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Before I take questions from the commission, I would just ask the director, the findings in the staff report and the professional opinion of the planning staff is that this does not set a precedence for other gas stations.
That is correct. We are looking at this site and the specific conditions relative to this site in making our determination. And so it is specific to this site and would not apply to other sites unless they are also similarly situated.
Thank you. Commissioner Donenfeld.
The existing state of the canopy edges are lighted, is that correct? They're lighted now, but just in a different way.
Correct. They splash light up against the canopy itself.
And would that not also be considered a sign?
Correct. It was done several years ago without permitting, and we now have a new sign ordinance, which the Planning Commission.
Because I was thinking if it was replacing an existing sign with something similar, you wouldn't have a variance issue, but I see they were out of compliance with respect to the existing lighting of the edge of the canopy.
That's correct. Staff cannot find a permit.
I understand. Thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Did the AAC offer an opinion about the sign itself, or just that it is a sign?
They were just asked to determine if it was a sign.
But not the opinion about the sign?
Not the design or the illumination levels.
Okay. And currently, I'm taking it to mean that there's no backlit illumination. The illumination is front lit. In other words, there's illumination on the surface of the yellow and red band. Is that right?
Currently, the light splashes, and the applicant may be able to describe this better. It splashes the yellow, and the red is like a red plexi face that glows.
So it's backlit, the red plexi face?
You could say that.
Okay. And then I have a couple more questions. The Porsche building that we approved those red bands on, was that considered a sign?
That was considered part of the building architecture.
Okay.
And was not part of the signage.
And is that just general information? Was that different than this, or is it just a matter of opinion? How do you differentiate those two?
The Porsche design was, as you know, was a major architectural application, and it was part of the integral portion of the design of the building. And if you remember, the Planning Commission had put some conditions on that lighting, that it would only be on until a certain hour, and it would be dimmable if it's deemed obtrusive.
Right. I know we were concerned about some residential areas adjacent to that building, which doesn't seem to be the case here, but so if it's more integrated into the building itself, would you say that's the differentiation, that takes it out of the classification as signage?
Let me go ahead and jump in here. I would say yes, I would agree with that. Where it's integrated with the architecture of the building and it's not intended to either mirror the logo or any type of advertising for the company, then we would consider that separately. Again, with the Porsche, their signage came in as a separate application, separate and apart from the red illumination that they have as part of the building. And it's not part of their standard sign package, if you will. It was separate and distinct from that.
Okay. It seems to me it's not what they call it, it's what we call it, whether it's part of their sign package or not. And I think that the fact that it's more integrated into the building would be more of a justification taking it out of the sign classification, rather than saying they didn't apply for a signage permit for it.
Correct.
That'd be my opinion.
Yeah, and also in terms of the new sign ordinance that was adopted in 2017, it also includes lighting as part of your signage if it's part of the overall branding package of the...
Okay, sorry, say that again?
The new sign ordinance that was adopted in 2017 includes language that lighting is also considered to be signage when it's part of your standard branding package.
Standard branding, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. You say that this would not lead to a precedent, and yet under the findings, number 1, you say that we should grant this application because others have been granted similar design variances. So, it's either a precedent or it's not, and if it's not, then it shouldn't be listed as part of the findings.
We could easily adjust that finding if we need to.
I'd just like to hear staff.
Yes, certainly.
Which condition you said?
Findings,
number 1
on page 7 and 9. The code, strict application of the code would deprive subject property of privilege enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity and under identical zone classification. Well, to me, that's citing precedent as a reason to approve. And if we're not saying this is a precedent, then we should take that out of the findings.
Right, I think that was, it's referencing, it's prohibiting them from operating as a service station because of the location of the fuel islands at the back of the property, not at the corner.
I could speak to that a little bit too. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is the actual legal standard that you have to meet for finding number 1 here. And when they refer to other properties, it's if I'm applying for a variance, my property, because of topography, geography, unique circumstances to my property, puts me at a relative disadvantage to similar properties in the area. And the applicant here is claiming because of the topography, the location stuff, they need basically like a signage boost in a way to get equivalent status to what other gas stations do that have maybe a more level site, different layout, things like that. So this is not a reference to it's doing what everybody else is doing. It's my property relative to others similarly situated is at a disadvantage and the variance is necessary. So I can enjoy the same legal and development rights as similarly situated properties. But each case is taken on its particular facts.
So the privilege that it's referencing is not the other gas stations that have illuminated signage above the amount?
No, it would be similar gas stations that have, for lack of a better term, regular or level topography.
Okay. I
and
misunderstood
have a
that
standard orientation of your typical
I misread that. I got another question. What did the width of the street, the widening of the street, have to do with justifying the variance? I didn't understand that justification.
So over the years, medians have been added.
Yeah.
Some landscaping has been added. So the road at one point would have been, or the site would have been more visible because signage wasn't blocking it to, if you look at this picture,
Well, that's
there's
the
a lot of
building.
signage.
No, that's the building. I know the building you
Right.
said does that, but what about you said the width of the road somehow mitigated for approval of the variance. I was wondering what in your mind, can you take me through that analysis, how the width of the road would should allow for the variance?
Correct. So when the building was first built, it would have been set back from the property lines and the roads would have been farther out. And over the years, as the state highway was widened, it brought more lanes, more traffic, more cars that could block the visibility and push the site further away from the corner.
So it's the number of cars on the street that would cause the change of visibility?
A number of circumstances that would, in our opinion, would boast their argument.
And then as far as their statement that the signage, let's see, I'm just trying to find it here. It is clear that the existing signage can't be seen until motorists are right on top of the station. Well, this won't change that, will it?
When you are coming north on Gene Autry Trail, farther down towards Sunny Dunes. So when you go past the Desert Water Agency, you're at a high point in the road. And as you go down towards Ramon Road, they claim that it is because the topography, the building sits lower than the street at that point, that it's harder to determine that if I'm going to stop at this gas station, I need to, you can't make a left turn into it because of the medians. So you have to be able to maneuver your way to get onto the site.
But the changing from the existing signage to the new signage won't modify that scenario, will it?
Just that it's more visible, in their opinion, with the glow of the red.
Okay. Okay, see, I think I might have had one. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Gardner.
So along those lines, I wanted to find out, is the illumination going to be brighter now with this new signage? And how much brighter?
I would, when you change out any aging sign with a newer sign, I would say that it would be a brighter. I don't have an illuminations level for it, but I think just by changing it out, it would be, and the applicant may be able to explain the type of lighting in their detail. It calls it LED. I don't know what the type of lighting is now. I would assume it's some kind of light backing system.
Any other questions for the commission? Glenn, I have one for you. We talked about you mentioned in the public record that the Porsche dealership, we put a dimming on it because we weren't sure how bright it was going to be. Do you know if this is going to have dimming capability or not?
That is not one of the conditions of approval.
Okay, so we don't know if it's got dimming on. At this point, it's not dimmable.
No, and I would assume that would be on at night, all night.
Okay, great.
I don't know if the gas station's 24 hours or not, but that
Thank
may be
you.
a condition you could add.
All right, hearing no more questions from the commission, I'll open the public hearing. The applicant is here, and would you just state your name again for the record? And you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners, including the new commissioners. Thank you for serving, and all of you. Marvin Roos, retired planner, and Michael Hoffman and I have been friends for a long time, and he asked if I could help. I was actually on staff when this swing station was originally approved. Had a typical design, building in the back, the islands out front, and not a particularly wonderful design. He then hired Frank Urrutia, and this is really one of the finest gas station designs, I believe, in the city still. So many have been lost. But if you look at it, essentially everything that's there was there in 1993, designed by Frank Urrutia. It's just changed over the years, and I think the last major change was in 2007. And certainly in the past, this kind of lighting and fascia elements weren't considered signage in the past, and weren't considered it in 2007 when Craig Ewing approved basically what you see now. However, we do have the grounds for a variance, which is unusual between the topography and it was really a street configuration that we identified, and the addition of the median islands in particular. If you're westbound, you can't see this thing until you get to the intersection. If you're southbound, you can't see it because of the airport. And at night, you get this friendly glow. And those of us, gas stations are kind of unique in that, is that a lot of us go to one type of station. So you're looking for, I look for Chevron colors, sometimes Shell colors. But the signage itself is so small that you really, But you old guys like me, you can't see that shell, and you just know it's a shell. So the change really will keep the station much as it is now, and it has been, and is consistent with the original Uridia design. It's just different materials that come up over time. Station is 24/7. The pumps are. There's a little convenience store in there, and that's not open. But over the years, it's become less and less visible, and we could apply for a variance to go to a high pylon sign or something, but we chose not to do that. We just think that the standard branding configuration is tasty, fits the station, and will allow the station to remain viable for the period of time. I don't have any specifics on the dimmability of the sign. We're certainly acceptable. That would be an acceptable condition to us if we could look at it with staff. But you really have to go look at it at night. I mean, it's just you know what it is because we know what it is, but it's not because you can read the shell typically. And the other thing with the lighting is it gives you a little earlier recognition as a motorist. Oh, I need to get over to the right lane, I need to make a left turn, whatever it is. And if you're waiting, if you didn't have that band of color, the signage would really have to be made much bolder and bigger, and we didn't want to do that particularly. So we appreciate the recommendation for approval. Again, the inclusion of building lighting as part of the signage is relatively new. That in the past was not the case. And you see, and I don't think it's just lighting, night lighting that makes a difference. I think if you have branding and the colors are there, I think that would have to be, now it would be considered signage. In the past, it was just considered architecture. And I'd put this station up with any, particularly for night views. I think it's very tasty. And it was the staff that recommended that he flip the station to the back, so we'll feel a little responsibility for that. But I think it's made for a really nice-looking gas station, and it's served well over the years. Any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Roos. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this item? Not hearing. Oh, can you come forward and state your name? And you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Nina Brentham. I'm here under sign development for the applicant. Currently, it's not dimmable, the red banding that's around. We do a lot of gas stations. We haven't had issues with it in the past, but I do believe that they could add dimming to that red band if that's what's needed. I don't know if you guys have any other questions for me.
We may. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to the discussion? Okay. With that, I will close public comment and open it. Are there any questions from the commission to the applicant? Commissioner Song.
Hi. So do you have the exhibits with you?
I do.
Okay. Can we go to page 4 of 6, as well as the light details that was submitted today? So if I look at your light detail, starting with the detail on the right side, that's the sort of the white panel, background panel that you're proposing for the entire fascia, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the second one on the left side, that's where you have this this shaped yellow form.
Correct.
And then the LED is inside of this lens.
Red illuminated bar, correct?
Uh-huh. And that lens is what glows. Okay. So if I look at your page 4 of 6, where it says typical shell site, as a photograph.
That my drawings might be numbered a little bit different than yours.
Is that one there?
That one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see the detail where it says typical shell light?
Yep.
Okay, that's a photograph of your detail, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what's different about this photograph is that the LED seems to light back to the fascia, but maybe it's just the quality of the photo. You're saying that the red light actually glows.
So existing now, it's backlit, and so it lights up all the yellow that's on the canopy fascia now. What we're proposing, it would only be glowing that red strip at night.
Okay, and then the logo, the shell logo actually is like a wrap
Illuminated.
fascia in front of that.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can see the small typical shell site, the little panel on the right-hand side, that's what it looks like.
Okay. And do you happen to know the size of that LED light? And I don't mean physical size, the
I do know
temperature.
the square footage of it. I don't know exact dimensions.
No, it says here 5, almost 6 inches red bar.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I meant the temperature of the light.
Oh, the temperature? No, I do not.
Okay, right. I'll go on the record to say that I was at AAC to review this package for you, and I would go on record to say that if the packet was this packet, it might have gone differently. Yeah. I think this is much more informative on what is proposed and why the variance was asked. And I understand now in comprehensive way why the request is being made. And Commissioner Mike is absolutely right. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't push the Shell station all the way to the front. It doesn't really do anything. But what it does is just brings crispness to what you're trying to do. And that's what this package reveals to me with the work of Glenn.
I'll let the contractor know.
Are there more questions of the staff, of the applicant at this point? Commissioner Gardner.
So back to the illumination point. So I think what I understood is that you're not sure how much brighter this light will be than the current light. Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Hearing no more questions from the commission, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much for coming up. Thank you for testifying. It's now amongst us to discuss and make a motion. Commissioner Gardner.
So I drove by today at 4:30 in the morning, and I go by this intersection a lot. And I do think that right now that is very dim, and that area in general is really dark at night. So to me, if this has better illumination, would be a real big plus for that area. I know I almost got in a car accident just recently in that area because it's so dark. So anything to brighten it up is good.
Commissioner Donifield.
I go by here, I think all of us do. This is a very heavily traveled intersection, and I think one thing to be said for widening it means it's just become a much more confusing intersection, and given the topography on which this is placed, it's very difficult to figure out even how to get into it. And so I can understand why a variance would be important. And I think finally what it does is it just brings the signage up to a more current state. An LED light, it just looks clean, as Commissioner Song said, it looks cleaner and more modern and more high-tech, I think. So I'm in favor of it.
Other comments? I just want to mention that I would echo your comments, Commissioner Donifield, exactly. We also do not want light spill onto adjacent areas, which is part of our zoning code. So I would just think that we'd want it to be dimmable just in case there is a problem with it in any way, like what we saw with the Porsche dealership. So with that, do I hear a motion? And Commissioner Song, was that a motion to approve the staff recommendation and the findings? With the commission of dimmability. Okay, great. And there's a first and a second. Can we all vote? The motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roos. It's always nice to see you. We're going to move on to new business, item number 4A on the agenda. This is the City of Palm Springs for an initiation of a change of zone at 4 locations. The first one is a city-owned property zoned CU at 190 West Sunny Dune Roads. The second one is also a city-owned property zoned CU located at the southwest of the intersection of North Indian Canyon and Stevens Road. The third one is a privately owned property zoned CU at 342 North Palm Canyon Drive. And the fourth and final one is a privately owned property zone P located at the northwest corner of Cerritos Road and Sierra Road. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. So tagging on to what you kind of reviewed at your last meeting with updates to the city's zoning code is what you have before you now is a request to initiate a zone change for certain properties that we see issues with the current zoning. So as you've stated, there are 3 properties, actually 4 properties in total, or 4 areas, I should say. And the first 3 are civic use zoned properties, 2 of which are owned by the city, and one was previously owned by the city but has been sold. And the fourth is a professionally zoned property near the other item we had on the agenda today off of Vistachino and Cerritos. So I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. The first location is 190 West Sunny Dunes Road. It is currently zoned civic use and has a general plan designation of mixed use. It's 0.16 acres in size, just off of South Palm Canyon Drive. You see on the screen the location, the area on the left, and then on the right is the zoning as it relates to the property surrounded in green, and the adjacent areas are C2. So that was the previous zoning for this site, and it would make sense to just continue the C2 zoning for a change of zone for this property. Location 2 is on North Palm Canyon Drive, south of Stevens Road. It is an undeveloped site that's 0.76 acres in size, civic use zone, and also mixed use general plan designation. You can see on the right the zoning of the properties to the north and south is C1 along the Palm Canyon frontage and R2 to the rear, and that was the previous designations for this site, or zoning designations for this site, and it would make sense to rezone that back to be consistent with the zoning to the north and south. The third location is the Cork and Bottle Class 1 historic building located at 342 North Palm Canyon Drive. As you see in the zoning map, it is CU and the only parcel zone CU for the block, but the CBD designation would make sense to be consistent with the general plan. So location 4 is a bit more complicated, but it is currently zone P professional and has a general plan designation of low density residential. This includes 10 parcels of land. 3 of these parcels are developed with multifamily housing, and then 1 property is a single family property. So the zone that would make sense for a rezone of this area would be RGA 6, which is residential garden apartment or cluster residential. That zone does allow single family as well as multifamily properties consistent with the low density residential general plan designation that currently exists on this block. However, the property is located to the northwest of the airport and is subject to the Riverside County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And this is, the Airport Land Use Commission is a county agency, and they have them throughout the state, and what they do is they regulate private development as well as some development within airport property and land use around airports to ensure or minimize the loss of life or damage to property in the event of an airport or an airplane crash. So what they do is they establish zones. Zone A is essentially the airport runway areas and directly adjacent to the flight paths. Zone B1 gets further away from the landing area and then and so forth to Zone E, which you see here. And the airport influence area, which is all of these zones A through E, you can see it does expand in a quite large area, all the way from the city's limits beyond to Cathedral City and Rancho Mirage. So it does impact not only our city, but adjacent cities as well. But when we're looking at the property location 4, you can see here it is within the B1 zone, and it's highlighted here in a dashed white line on the bottom right of the screen. So it's one of obviously a number of properties that would be impacted, that is impacted by the B1 zone for the compatibility plan. And the B1 zone does limit residential development to 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres, which is quite significant, considering there's, excuse me, there's a much higher density that exists there now in the surrounding area. It does also limit non-residential intensity to an average of 25 people per acre, and requires open space of 30% and prohibits certain uses. So those are all identified in your staff report. So the city, when it does process the change of zone, the first step is to initiate that zone change. Staff would, if the commission does initiate the zone change, it can be done by either the planning commission or the city council. We would do some investigation and prepare or identify any, the CEQA process and go through those motions, and then bring it back to you at a public hearing. And then you would make a recommendation to the city council, and the city council would also hold a public hearing and make a decision on the application. So that's just kind of the process. How the airport land use compatibility plan works into that is prior to, I believe it would be the planning commission taking action on a change of zone. The commission, airport land use commission, would make a finding of either consistency or inconsistency. And if the Airport Land Use Commission finds that the proposed change of zone is inconsistent, essentially then the city would have to look at different options for finding a zone that would be consistent, or the city would have to overrule that determination and accept any liability or responsibility that goes along with that. So that's kind of a little bit of the issues that we're running into with this area. Obviously, the major problem with location 4 is we have currently a zone of zoning that's professional, and the general plan that's low density residential, and those are incompatible with each other. So the zoning would allow office, whereas the general plan allows residential, and similarly, they both prohibit those uses. So this is a problem that we would like to address sooner rather than later. So as I said, today is really the first step of the process, is to initiate the zone changes, and then we would go through the motions to investigate the necessary steps and any analysis that would go along with that, including discussions with the Airport Land Use Commission staff, and looking at their recommendations to move forward. So I'll conclude with that. I can answer any questions that the commission may have.
Great. Thank you, David.
Mr. Chair, I do have an addition to that. I discovered an issue late on Monday with another property where there's a conflict not only between the general plan and the zoning, but between the general plan and the current uses of the property. And I've got a handout here that I'd like to pass out to you if you'll give me just a moment. So in this location, if I can refer to the first page, which says general plan designation on the front, this is an area at the intersection of Via Lola and North Palm Canyon Drive. There's 4 parcels there. that are designated O office. And in the general plan designation for office, it's very limited in terms of the types of uses that it permits. It's basically professional office uses, and very limited commercial is permissible. It does not allow residential or hotel uses. If you go to the back of the page where it says zoning, the current zoning for that area is C1 in the front along North Palm Canyon, and then R2 in the back, which is a multifamily residential designation. The uses on those parcels are, the southernmost parcel there is the building known as The Twist, where Ernest Coffee and Bootlegger Tiki Bar is located, as well as the apartments and vacation rentals that are there in the Twist building. And so those uses are compatible with the C1 zoning district, but incompatible with the O office general plan designation. The property immediately to the north of that one is also a commercial use there. And I believe, let's see, the back parcel is parking, so there's not any issues with that necessarily. And then the fourth parcel up on the northeast corner in that red square, I believe, is primarily office uses. So that one doesn't have an issue as much. But going back to the general plan, there's a conflict between the general plan, the zoning, and the current use of the property. And looking at the general plan designation, it seems a little odd that that portion on the west side of Palm Canyon is designated as office when the other uses along there are tourist resort commercial or other commercial uses. And so as part of this effort that Mr. Newell discussed relative to correcting conflicts between the zoning and the general plan in the areas that he discussed, as part of this effort, what I would like to do is investigate this area, as I have had a question come forward, and I believe that there is an issue with the designation that the city has placed on this relative to the general plan. I'd like to do some further research on this and bring this back to you at a later point in time as well. So that concludes my comments. Again, if we could go ahead and discuss the items that Mr. Newell has put forward, and then if you have any questions for me, I'll answer those at that time as well.
Great, thank you. I want to compliment staff for being proactive in this. I'm sure you've dealt with problems with it, but for bringing it forward to us in a proactive mode and motion is really fantastic. Thank you. Commissioner Gardner, did you have a question of staff?
So it says changing this from civic use to mixed use. Mixed use is not the zoning in the zoning code, right? It's another letter, or what is it called?
So the mixed use is the general plan designation.
Okay.
Yep, so that would be, that would still remain, but we would look at reverting back to the previous designation.
What is the previous designation?
Which location?
For 1, 2, and 3?
So location 1 is C2. Like on the right side of the screen.
Okay.
So that would just be a continuation of that zone. Location 2 would be a continuation of the C1 and R2, and CBD for location 3.
Okay. And do we know why these were designated as civic use at one point?
Yeah, so in 2012, the city took an inventory of its property, and I believe it was related to the efforts in keeping the property because it went back to the dissolution of the redevelopment agency and ensuring that the property could be held by the city with this zone. So I think it was in relation to that, but since we're considering selling these properties, when I've spoken with the Director of Community and Economic Development, he identified these three as the ones that would be important to change, especially considering that one of them has already been sold.
Which one has been sold?
The Cork and Bottle, location 3.
Okay, that's what I thought. Why is it that we're trying to sell them?
I'm not sure if their office is looking at redevelopment or development of housing, or it could be any number of reasons.
So the reason I ask is because the civic use in the zoning code, it gives like a long list of options for those property, like including a child care center even. So there's a lot of opportunity there for this city, and so I'm just curious as to why we would be getting rid of these property when there's possibility to use it for the good of the community.
Let me just jump in, Mr. Chair. In terms of getting rid of these properties, with the dissolution of redevelopment agencies by the state in 2012, there's no longer really the ability for us to redevelop these properties, and there's really no need for us to hang on to these properties. And so for that reason, that's why we're looking at returning these back to what would be the appropriate zoning for the site. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't retain the properties and use them if the city council so chooses. They still have the ability to do that, nor does that preclude the option of being able to use them for some type of civic use in the future. That a lot of the civic uses would be compatible under other zoning designations as well. Daycare is one, for example, that you mentioned, that it doesn't need to be zoned civic use in order to do daycare facilities.
Right, okay. So, but to just make sure I understand correctly, part of the reason that we're doing this is because of something that happened within the state that is kind of out of our hands.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Song.
Hi, David. On location number 2, according to the adjacencies, it's almost that the property fronting North Indian Canyon is more C1, and then the property fronting sort of Camino Norte is R2. Could it be assigned for both, or could it be interchangeable depending on how the application for entitlement could come in?
Yeah, it could be, and I know the Economic Development Office is looking at, ultimately the goal would be to assemble more properties to create a larger or a more impactful development. So it could be that an application comes in to develop either within, uses permitted that could be either of those zones. And the C1 zone does permit multifamily, and so it could have a multifamily project there across the entire site. It could have frontage that is commercial. So I think there's a lot more opportunity with the C1 R2 combination instead of the civic use, and it actually has a higher value for the city if the city is trying to sell the property.
Okay. The other thing is on location 4, I want to commend staff because having ALUC involved as part of the process is a lengthy process, and that the fact that you're willing to go through that to find out what will be the best zoning for that area. I think the question would be, would that be the middle income entry neighborhood that it's today, or would it be better served with more density? Those are that in what ALUC will allow or not allow and where the city will stand. That in itself, it's an investment from staff. So I want to support that. In question about what happens after staff does their finding, does that come back to Planning Commission on that particular site?
Yes, it would. If whatever we found for these 4 or potentially 5 locations, we would bring back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation at a public hearing.
But to clarify that, the first 3 sites are more straightforward than the 4th site.
Yeah, we would report back to you the results, even if we were unsuccessful with the Airport Land Use Commission. So, and look at whatever other opportunities there may be that works for the city, as well as hopefully closer to getting to conformance with the Land Use Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners because they asked most of my questions. But in terms of, there was another site that the city was in escrow on North Palm Canyon, and then the escrow, as I understand it, was revoked. Was that part of the CU classification, or did the zoning on that change as part of this process?
Where was that?
It was on North Palm Canyon, and a few years back, it was in escrow, and because of some circumstances, the escrow was revoked.
I believe that was the Cork and Bottle site.
No, it was on the other side of the street further north, and it had to do with the purchaser being involved in some legal problems.
I think that is location 2.
Is that the one you're speaking of?
Is that it? Were we in escrow in that? Was the city in escrow in that prior to this?
Yeah, I believe the city has owned more than this parcel and has sold off other parcel.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'm a little confused. Thank you. Sorry.
Are there more questions of staff at this point? So hearing none, it's amongst ourselves to discuss and possibly make a motion. Commissioner Carter?
I think this is probably a question for staff. So with the property number 4 in the B1 zone, so as you pointed out that there's a lot of other property in the B1 zone that is clearly not in compliance with, the county zoning. So my concern there, because I was reading these county requirements, and it had a lot of valid reasons about hazards with planes and things like that. I certainly feel that it's something that needs to be taken into some pretty deep conversation about what would be good for that area, and because while it would be nice to have more housing, if it's going to be detrimental, and if these other people who are living there already are kind of at more risk, that's not a good thing. So I'm just curious to know kind of how that happened. Did these county regulations come in after all of those homes were built? I mean, what went on to make this an issue?
Yeah, I think the history behind it is as the city has grown and as the airport has expanded, these kind of conflicts have come up. So some of these tracks, well, I think most of these tracks were established 50 years ago. And the airport probably wasn't as big as it, well, definitely wasn't as big as it is now. And as we've instituted more regulations at the state level, and these items are now coming forward, and we have these conflicts. When I've spoken to the staff at the Airport Land Use Commission's office, Moreno Valley is dealing with this issue. There's other cities that have run into this problem where the Airport Land Use Commission's goal is to really protect life around the airport and minimize damage or loss of life. So, and at the same time, the city has an obligation to not take property and ensure that people have some rights to develop their property. So I think we're going to have to investigate is finding the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Anything more? Okay. I think David is exactly right. I mean, even LAX has dealt with this issue, as Santa Monica and many of the bigger and smaller airports around. Do we have a motion?
Your mic. Sorry.
To allow the staff to proceed with the zoning changing processing.
For all 5, including the one that was added by the director?
Correct.
Did you say you wanted to add that one, or you want to do some research before you bring it back to us? Oh, can we do that under the Brown Act since it wasn't noticed up?
Because this is only direction to staff, there isn't a Brown Act issue relative to having this on the agenda. This would come forward to you at a noticed public hearing. As a general plan amendment, it will also require a neighborhood outreach meeting prior, so we will go through the proper process for it.
Okay, so a motion has been made, and is there a second to the motion? Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. Can we all vote? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen and women. That concludes the formal agenda part of our meeting, and we move on to Planning Commission reports, requests, or comments. Are there any comments from the Planning Commissioner? Commissioner Hirschman.
Yes, I'd like to request that the staff look at what was approved for the Vibe project on the other side of Tockwitz, having to do with the distance between the wall that separates the habitable area of the project from the edge of the sidewalk. I had, my recollection is anyway, that I had made a condition of the approval that there be 20 feet of plantable area between the wall and the sidewalk. The fence is down now, and it looks like, although the wall distance to the wall varies, so the distance to the wall varies, but in the minimum size, I didn't take a tape measure out there, but it seems to me it's clearly not 20 feet. And I was wondering if someone from staff can verify whether that's an issue or not.
Yeah, we had looked at that when the wall was first installed, but we will be happy to provide verification to the Planning Commission.
And when you looked at that, were you aware that that was a condition?
Yes.
Okay, so it is a condition.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether the condition was adhered to or conformed to. Okay, thank you very much. And you'll report back to us on that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Question?
I have a question to staff. Any update on the Bel Air Greens overall situation in terms of the tribal ownership, the general plan amendment request, or any of issues related to it?
The applicant did submit the general plan amendment back in, I believe it was July, and staff has initiated or requested bids from our CEQA consultants and has informed the applicant of those costs, and he is yet to proceed, and pay those fees. So it's essentially on hold. And
what about the tribal aspect? The tribal ownership aspect?
It's a Lot T land and leased, so it is tribal.
So there aren't any questions related to tribal ownership in that particular case?
So it's owned by a member of the tribe. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Is it the other, is it Mesquite that had the issue that was unresolved regarding the tribe?
Mesquite is fee land within the reservation. There is a small portion that is allotted and leased, and that's relative to one of the developments in around that property.
Then where do we stand overall with the ordinance that was presented to council?
Staff is going to have a report on the March 6th City Council agenda related to the moratorium, and we anticipate March 20th the council discussing these matters. The moratorium dies March 28th unless something happens before then.
Any other comments, requests from the commissioners? Hearing none, I see we have our commission liaison, our city council liaison in the audience. Thank you very much. Councilmember Middleton, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I did not come with an agenda of anything to say, but I looked at my calendar and I actually had a half hour free and scuttled over here in case you had anything that you wanted to ask me about.
Does anyone
and if
have
you
anything?
don't, I'm happy to. There's one or two things on my desk.
Any questions of our council liaison? Hearing none, we'll move on to the planning director's report. Thank you, Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I had been requested to report on was the status of the downtown park. I'm happy to report that the construction documents have been provided to staff for review. Just to follow up, as you'll recall, the last time we met together as a group, we offered comments on design suggestions relative to the park and improvements and changes. We forwarded those on to our consultant who went forward and was able to include a number of those. I don't think they were able to include all of the suggestions that came forward out of all of our groups, but incorporated those as part of the design revisions to the park itself. One of the areas where there was a minor change was relative to the size of the police substation. The police, in reviewing the initial plans, indicated that they had needed some more room, and so that facility was expanded somewhat, but it still retains the same essential features that you all saw, I believe, last summer when you reviewed those plans. Again, we are in the process of reviewing the construction documents now to make sure that they conform to our specifications and to the conditions that have been placed on it by council. And the idea is that those will go forward, we'll go to a bidding process, and then council will review the bids, and we can hopefully begin construction here soon. So we're very encouraged with the process on this and look forward to that amenity in the downtown area. That's all I have for reports. We did talk about the 700 forms that you need to submit. Just a reminder to do that, and I see that there's a couple of questions.
Yes, go ahead. Commissioner Donovan.
When Mr. Braun was here on a matter, Mr. Hirschbein was very emphatic, and we all agree with him, I think, that something needs to be done behind Block B with respect to where the Virgin might or might not go, and it's quite unsightly. And I think the Planning Commission, I think Council addressed this as well with him. I think he was given 60 days to comply and clean up, but I walked by there the other day. I don't see much progress being made. Do you
Yes,
have any?
that's correct. There was that condition that was forwarded on to the City Council, and City Council did include conditions relative to the status of the Virgin site until construction begins there. He has until March to clean that up. I believe there was a requirement that some type of temporary art piece be installed on the site that would be reviewed by the City Council subcommittee. But he's coming up shortly that will need to be done.
The City Council Subcommittee is Councilmember Roberts and I, and we did have an ad hoc discussion with Mr. Braun a couple of weeks ago, discussing various alternatives that could be used for that site, and none were identified and agreed to, but he is looking at a couple of things that could be interesting, one of which was some temporary pickleball courts to be painted and used on that site. Others were beach volleyball sites. On the day that we went through it, it was right after one of our rainstorms, and there was quite a bit of water in there that we christened Lake Braun. So I think it would be very appropriate, though, for staff to make a reminder to Mr. Braun of the deadline that he's facing, and I know I would appreciate being reminded of the specific date as well for that cleanup.
So noted.
Did your discussion modify that date?
No, absolutely.
Commissioner Hirschbein, did you have a question? You asked it already? Are there any more?
I took his, I didn't mean.
You took his question, okay. Good teamwork up here. Hearing no more questions, can I call for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Say aye. Thank you. We're adjourned until the meeting of, I don't have the date.
March the 13th.
March the 13th, 2019.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.